Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 level podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for our 38th episode this week, where we'll be recapping last Sunday's game versus the Baltimore Ravens, previewing the Patriots' upcoming game versus the Green Bay Packers, with a special guest, Andrew Dakota, and discussing news around the NFL. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pat's 300 level pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day, as well as at our website at pats300levelpod.com. So, Kevin, Patriots ended up losing kind of a frustrating game, 37-26. They were in it for most of the game. And then the fourth quarter was the worst I've ever seen the Patriots play in a single quarter, especially to end a game. But besides all that, that's all irrelevant compared to the main takeaway from the game, which is Mac Jones' injury, which the last offensive play of the game, he gets hurt where Calais Campbell, a 340-pound lineman, lands on his ankle. Mm-hmm. And reports are that it was a severe strain or sprain. Nothing broken, which is at least a good thing, but it's looking like he's going to be injured out for some time at least, possibly IR stint, maybe longer. What are your overall thoughts on the injury and how that impacts the Patriots going forward?
Yeah. Obviously, injury is not good, and it's not something that we're hoping to be here for.
Yeah.
There's a few kind of things that are kind of silver linings. One, it was nothing, no broken bones or anything like that, so that's good. So you don't have to worry about Trey Lance situation out for the year. And then number two, the other good kind of factor, and it's not really good for him, but if you're going to have an injury to your quarterback, this is probably the best time where it could happen, where you're going into the weakest part of your schedule, where you have an opportunity after next week. Yeah. So after the Packers, you have a bunch of opportunities where Hoyer can win you either all of them or the majority of the games by being a game manager, by running the ball, by him just not making many mental mistakes. And usually he doesn't do that in those kind of easy games.
1 o'clock Sunday.
Yeah, 1 o'clock Sunday games, or there's no pressure on the line. So it's not as bad as it could be. And then the other thing too, with it being a high ankle sprain, we have seen a bunch of people come back from it actually not as long as they say, where both Tua and Jalen Hurts at Alabama, they both had high ankle sprains. They ended up having this procedure done that was called a tightrope procedure, where it's a newer type of surgery. Rather than using screws or bolts, they actually do something with this high tension. I'm not a doctor of medicine, but they do some sort of procedure. It's different than screws, and it cuts the recovery time almost in half. Both players are back in less than 4 weeks, whereas usually this injury is a 6 to 8 week. Jimmy Garoppolo had it. He was out for 6 weeks, played, I think, a week or two, then was out the rest of the year because he just wasn't right. But again, that's Jimmy Garoppolo. It's not Mac Jones. Mac played through a whole bunch last year that Jimmy would have never played through. So I don't think you can kind of really compare the two. So I think you did catch a couple breaks. Is it the best case scenario? No, but it could be a lot worse. So I like to think of it glass half full.
And I think another thing that's kind of a silver lining is it's not his plant ankle, which might allow him to come back sooner. If this was his right ankle, which he's planting and then throwing off of, it might be a much longer time frame. But since it's his left ankle, where he doesn't have to place the weight of his body on, he might be able to come back sooner.
Exactly. So again, we don't really know much. I know he's going for a second opinion just to see. Could be one of those surgeons that specialize in that procedure. Could be a regular surgeon. Could be someone else, for all we know. Yeah. I know there's someone out of Green Bay that's an ankle specialist too. A lot of players see. So we'll just have to wait and see, really, and see what happens. And everyone's different too. So that's the other thing. His recovery could be faster, could be slower. From all things I've seen with him, would it shock me if he was back in 2 to 3 weeks? No. But again, am I counting on it? No. So we'll get into a little bit later on just about Brian Hoyer, but we'll have to see. Anything else on the injury before we go kind of recap the game?
No, just I guess the last thing is the thing that's most unfortunate is it was the last offensive play of the game where they still had a shot. We saw last week where the Cleveland Browns gave up. They were up by, I think, 13 with a minute 40 to go, and then they blew it. So you have to keep them in there. You have to try and win because anything can happen. But it's just unfortunate that it had to happen that last play of the game where it mattered, but it didn't really.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So kind of going on to how Mac actually played in this game,
Yeah.
I think we did see some progress from the last 2 weeks where he did kind of drive the ball down the field more. He did play a lot more crisp than before. He still had a bunch of mistakes and 3 interceptions. And again, looking at the film, looking at kind of all the other film review with it, not all of those interceptions were really his fault, other than really the last one was kind of the biggest one. The first one was, I don't think, really a good play draw up. And again, targeting Parker in both of those first 2 interceptions, where in the second one, Parker running the wrong route. Also, again, kind
Yeah.
of knowing that he was going to him and kind of, but he didn't have the time to really look the rest of the field. So that's the other thing
Yeah.
with that corner blitz. But he needs to be more sharp. And again, one of the things where we've talked about the last 2 weeks is that just execution and mental mistakes, and he has to cut those down. We weren't seeing
Yeah.
as many of these last year with him, where he was making all these sorts of misreads, and he's not scanning the field as much. This year, he seems like he's honing in on targets a lot more than before. Not every play, because we've seen him look off safeties and everything, but he just doesn't seem as kind of sure of everything. And I
Yeah.
think part of that is the pressure he's been getting. And we don't have the numbers yet about what pressure percentage he had, but it seemed like a lot. And I think a big part of that problem was the pressure coming off the right side with Wynn, where you had Wynn have holding calls to try and get up from it. He was getting just pushed around. There was a bunch
Yeah.
of twists and stunts that ran on him that he just could not figure out, and he couldn't pass the guy at the right time, and gonna end up getting the other defensive lineman on there. So there's a whole bunch of things. It could just be all the pressure lining up from the defense, and that's adding into it. And if you see above 30%, it's going to make someone be a lot more rushed. So that could be
Yeah.
what's happening too. And he just needs more protection. But it's unfortunate about the injury happened, because he was starting to get into the steps in the right directions. And
Yeah.
you'd hope that maybe in week 4, we would kind of see these miscues and things kind of start to cut down, because he's made progress each and every week. So, but we'll see.
Yeah. Now, my thoughts are, other than about 4 or 5 throws,
Mhm.
this was one of the best games I've seen from him. And his whole, obviously, best game of the season and one of the best games of his Patriot career, just because of he was throwing the deep ball accurately. He was stepping into it as well. But the thing is, those 4 or 5 throws were brutal, and they were a large part of why they lost the game.
Mhm.
And we've seen him, it's just throughout the first 3 weeks, we've seen him have mental miscues where he just doesn't see someone or throws it and does a bad decision, where the Parker interception in the end zone, he just threw it off his back foot without even just like while backpedaling.
Mhm.
And it's stuff that we didn't see him doing last year. And part of it, I think, is he's trying to do a little too much. And I think
Mhm.
another part of it is also they're trusting him to do more and more, which is why we've seen him have some of those big throws this week. But I think that's just something that is going to come with time, that he will try and cut those down. Everyone has bad weeks as quarterback, but
Mhm.
for someone that's as accurate as he has been in his whole career, he's even been accurate this year. He has the same completion percentage he did last year
Mhm.
on some tougher throws, but it's just those mental or bad decisions that we just didn't see last year. On the deep passes, he was, for passes at least 20 yards, he was 6 and 9 for 173 yards. So those were some good things as well. Hopefully this injury doesn't set him back too much. One good thing that could actually come out of it is it'll allow him to just kind of take a breather, especially if he was pressing, which I think was part of his issues the past few weeks, where he was trying to do too much. It allows him to kind of see the game a little slower and then come back when he's healthy and just try and find the open man instead of just forcing it into Devontae Parker or something like that. And then also, hopefully, when he comes back, the offensive line it'll be probably week 7, 8, maybe a little after that, where hopefully they're getting that cohesion and back on the same page.
And there's the other thing, kind of that breather too, where if he is sped up because of the amount of pressure he's getting, and he's kind of forcing things and need to get the ball out quicker, by that point he'll probably be slowed down a little bit, where
Yeah.
he's not really feeling that pressure, because it's not adding up week after week if he's staying out. So that may be one minor benefit.
Yeah.
Would I rather have him in there and have him sped up rather than being hurt? Yes, but
Yeah, of course.
it could be a little benefit for that.
Yeah.
Miscues, we talked about 4 turnovers. There was the 3 Mac interceptions. Aguilar had another costly fumble
Yeah.
where that's 2 weeks, well, not 2 weeks in a row, but two games in where you're going to try and have a big drive, and he
In the
ended
fourth
up
quarter.
in the fourth quarter, and he made a big catch to have
Yeah.
first down yards and going, and he fumbles it. So it's something where everyone knows about Aguilar with his hands and what happened with the Eagles and how they kind of thought of him over there with all of his drops.
Yeah.
We're seeing it not even more as drops. We're seeing it more of just of losing the ball. So that could be something where that can't happen.
Yeah.
And then just the other big thing, which really was frustrating to watch, is Bryant on punt returns and kick
Yeah. I
returns.
don't.
And just I
Yeah.
don't know why he's out there anymore. You drafted a guy to solely be a kick returner and punt returner, as well as be a cornerback, and everyone expected him to be on kick and punt returns in just his first year while he ramps up, especially because he was out for some injuries. And Marcus Jones hasn't really done that. He did do a couple kick returns
Yeah.
yesterday, but you didn't see him on the punt return coverage, and I don't want to see Bryant out there ever again.
Yeah. It's 3 weeks in a row where he had a bad decision on punt, two
Mhm,
fumbles, and then last week he also had some bad decisions as well. So I know he also had a good return last week, but it's just
mhm,
kind of frustrating. And it's not both times they ended up recovering, so it didn't cost them. But
mhm.
that's something where later on in the season it might, or if the ball slightly went another way, it
Yeah.
cost them as well.
Mhm,
Then another thing on the miscues is Isaiah Wynn had penalties on back-to-back drives to stall the drive, and
mhm,
we saw that week one against Miami too. And it's not only is he getting penalties, it's penalties that are in bad situations that kind of back them up. It's on plays
mhm,
that end up being good plays or things like that. And it kind of prevents them from getting points or finishing the drives because it puts them, instead of being a second and short or getting a first down, it puts them eventually back at third and long, which is tougher
mhm.
to convert.
Yep. And we'll talk about Wynn a little bit later on and kind of my thoughts on him. Moving on to really the other quarterback, Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
How do you really think he played in this game? And it was kind of what we've kind of seen this whole season, I think, where he'll be kind of slow, not doing too much, and then he'll turn on for a little bit, turn off, and then it was kind of up and down, but enough where he got the win.
So that's the thing. It's kind of tough. I mean, he had an incredible game, 4 touchdown throws and 1 rushing touchdown. Um, it's kind of tough to evaluate because the Patriots defense was so inconsistent. Because I think the first 4 drives they had 1 long touchdown drive, and then there was 2 3 and outs, and then an interception, I believe, interception. But then, so it looked to start off that they were doing well, but then as the game went on, um, he started running more, and I don't know
Mhm,
if that was just breakdown on the Patriots or if he just found a good hole and ran for it. And when he started running, that kind of opened up the offense to the Ravens again. And you have to give him credit on that. He's fast. He used his skill set to his advantage. So he had a really good game, and it looks like this year he's passing the ball better in the pocket than he has the rest of his career. It's still not great. He's still not
mhm,
Tom Brady by any stretch of the means, but he's getting better, and he doesn't really have a number one wide receiver other than Mark Andrews, which you could say he's the number one wide receiver, but other than
mhm,
Andrews, there's Bateman, who was pretty much non-existent this game, and no one else. He doesn't have Hollywood Brown as well outside,
mhm.
so I mean he's definitely getting better. And he beat them in a way I wasn't expecting the Patriots defense to allow him to beat them.
Yeah, I think one thing too, where I think we'll get to this a little bit later on too, but they did score 37 points. I think you can kind of say they would have scored a lot less if the Patriots didn't have 4 turnovers,
Yeah.
where you're giving them better field position, you're giving them more opportunities to score,
Yep.
and that makes it a lot harder on the defense anyway when you have turnovers because they got back out there faster. They don't have as much breather time. Where that also helps Lamar, where if they didn't have those 4 interceptions, 4 turnovers, really, they probably won't have scored as many points. The other thing too with Lamar, which I noticed, especially being during the game, where I don't know why they had him drop back so many times, like in a standard kind of offensive procedure where It's like either a drop back or a play action where he was the most effective on those like the RPOs or boots,
Yeah.
where you have to actually respect him running the ball. If he's standing up there in shotgun, just trying to throw from shotgun, they were probably 10 times better at covering than when it was any of those RPOs or
Yeah.
boots or getting him in motion where they had to kind of figure out where he was going. And I think they probably would have scored a lot more effectively, and the offense would have been a lot more efficient if they actually kept up with that. Because that was the one thing I kept on being like, if they sent him in shotgun, just trying to go back and throw, I knew they're probably going to stop him because
Yeah.
again, he's not the most accurate passer. He did have some throws where you're like, holy shit, that was really good. There was the touchdown to I think it was Andrews in the end zone.
That was a great throw and great catch.
Great
That
throw, great
nothing
catch.
else you could do.
Mm-hmm. So he
And
did
then
have a couple of
there was
those.
the other touchdown in the end zone, the
Mhm.
right side of the end zone, which was just perfect. It was against Miles Bryant. It was
Yeah.
perfect throw, perfect catch, good defense by Bryant, but just nothing
Mhm.
else he could do as well.
Yeah. But then you had other throws where he's in shotgun throwing and he misses guy on the outside by a few
Yeah.
feet. He overthrows some players, and you could tell he's again, he's not the best passer in the league, but
Yeah.
that's not what makes him special. It's his legs. And they, again, like I say, if you're a running quarterback, you're not going to last too long in the league, but that's what really makes him special. It's not like he's Josh Allen where he could be throwing it too and also running it. He really
Yeah.
needs to use his legs to make him most effective. And they need to use a little bit more of that, I think, if I were them.
Yep. And then one thing overall that in the first half, we saw the Patriots getting pressure. They got 4 sacks, 3 by Dietrich Wise. And the defensive line and front seven was pretty much making their presence felt. But
Mhm.
then the Ravens made adjustments, and it seemed that the Patriots just weren't able to get any more,
Mhm.
weren't effective anymore. I don't know if they just weren't able to make adjustments after that, or they made
Mhm.
adjustments and it still wasn't working. So you have to give the Ravens offense credit for making those adjustments. But
Mhm.
once that happened, that's when the Ravens offense kind of came back to life.
Mhm. And then just the other killer was Mark Andrews,
Yeah.
where we said to go into this game, the two players you had to take account for was Lamar and Mark Andrews,
Yeah.
and they didn't account for Mark Andrews. I don't know if that was a
They,
specific game plan where they were willing to give up the throws underneath to him to prevent any of those big plays by Jackson. But again, they could have had maybe another guy on him or a different guy, and maybe that's where losing Duggar for the week
yeah.
really kind of hurt them. But I thought Peppers played pretty well in this game though too for having his full first action since his
Yeah.
ACL. So
Yeah, so I think that's one thing that I wanted to bring up is, or I'll go with two things. One with Andrews,
mhm.
other than the second touchdown, he pretty much made all his plays on that second drive, which was the long touchdown drive,
Mhm.
where they were playing zone and he was just beating the zone. And then that's where he got most of his plays. After
Mhm.
that, they started to go man, where they had Phillips on him or Bledsoe on him, and he wasn't as productive other than that touchdown. So it kind of makes you wonder to begin with, why didn't you have someone man to man on him when he's the only guy that can beat you? And that's something that we were saying to begin with, but they at least made that adjustment. I feel like if Duggar was in there, he would have done a better job covering him. And then also with Duggar being in there, I still think Peppers would have played a lot along with Phillips, and that would have helped contain Lamar Jackson from running as much because Duggar is such a really good tackler, and it
Mhm.
allows more speed and bigger presence on the defense as well. So if Duggar was healthy, this is probably a completely different game. But
Yeah, man, I completely agree. Moving on, we already kind of talked about the inconsistency of the past G, so I think we can kind of move on to our 3 up 3 down,
yeah,
and I think we're gonna have pretty similar ones here.
yeah.
So if you want to go give your first, we'll kind of alternate from there.
Okay. My first one was Dietrich Wise. He's been your best defensive player. You could argue their best overall player through 3 games this season, which I don't think anyone would have said coming into the year. But I mean, he's a big body and he's really making his presence felt. 3 sacks, a tackle for loss. Granted, they were all in the first half, and he kind of had more of a quiet second half.
Mhm.
But still, he's been everywhere. He's been playing 80-90% of the snaps as a defensive lineman.
Mhm.
And it looks like he's kind of just putting it all together this year. And I've just been really impressed. And it's the first time a Patriot had 3 sacks in a game since Chandler Jones did, I believe, in 2015.
And it's the first he did them all in the first half too.
Yep.
So again, I have to agree. I'm going to go with Lawrence Taylor. I mean, Dietrich Wise for my number one up in the game. He played really well, especially in the first half. The second half, not as much, but again, there's some more turnovers there. So
Yep.
for the Patriots offense, so put more pressure on the defense. But again, he's been your best player week in and week out, and I'm the first one to admit when. Again, I never hated the player. I just
Yep.
hated how they were using him. So again,
Yep.
they may be using him a lot differently this year. And again, I haven't taken too much look at the tape just to see how he's being utilized, but they're putting him in better positions this year.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'll go with my second up, Jonathan Jones.
Mhm.
Just one interception, one forced fumble. He gave one catch on 2 targets. He's just been your number one cornerback, number one
Mhm.
defensive player. That interception especially was just incredible instincts, where if you
Mhm.
look back at it, he's covering his man and then he's watching the quarterback while he's covering his man and realizes it's not going to his man. So he jumps off
Mhm.
his man and is able to undercut the route and get the interception. Just incredible instincts for really smart player. And the forced fumble too. Ravens were getting the
Mhm.
ball, getting some productive yards, and then he strips it out. A great tackle, great forced fumble, and it was supposed to give the Patriots some life until they turned it over again once they got it back. But he's just been incredible. Pro Football Focus rates him as the number one cornerback in the NFL through 3 games this year, and I don't know if I'd say that much, but he does seem like he's solidifying that number one lockdown corner spot that you've had a really good run at the last decade or so, from Aqib Talib to Darrell Revis, Malcolm Butler to Stephon Gilmore to JC Jackson. And then Jonathan Jones has just continued, just took over and is continuing that.
Yep, I didn't end up including him in my 3 up, but he was going to be an honorable mention. I thought he played really well in this game. Again, like you said, he's definitely their number one cornerback. And this is kind of something that we heard kind of in 2 different spots. Matt Chatham on a preseason podcast and mentioned where Bill usually knows what he's doing with the cornerback position. He may not have had Jonathan Jones ever play on the outside, but they haven't played that in camp, in like in practice and in camp, and he probably knew going into this year, if I need to have him do it, he can do it. And
Yeah.
well, you know, and we said it last year too, when we were kind of claiming for Jones to play the other outside when there's only 2 receivers on the field. So he's doing a really good job at it. He's your best corner, and hopefully they can kind of extend him and
Yeah.
not pay him too much money because he would be, I think, a good kind of deal at that spot.
Yeah.
There.
And this is the last year of his contract too.
Yep. Um,
Oh,
so
you can. I didn't realize you didn't say your second one yet. Go.
yeah, so I had Stevenson. He had a average rush where I don't have the number off the top of my head. It was over 7.7 yards a carry. I think it was in eights by the end of the game. He was really dynamic in the game, in the running game especially. And
I
he's
got it
been
for
playing
6.1.
six. All right.
12 carries for 73 yards, 6.1 yards per carry with 1 touchdown.
Yeah, he's getting playing better and better each game, and he's kind of going where he was with last year. Last year, he heated up at the end, and the more touches he got, the better he was. And it looks like that's the way he is this year. The more and more he handles the ball, he's very explosive and fast. And he's a different running back than Harris, where they're both kind of powerful. They're both quick, but Stevenson has another level to him where he's really quick.
Yeah.
And he can break through those holes really fast. He can do a lot of different things, and he had a really good game, I thought.
Yeah. And his size too, which is, for someone to have that size of 6 feet 230, but then be that fast, is just
Mhm.
incredible. So I didn't have Stevenson in my top 3. I almost did, but I was going to have him as honorable
Mhm.
mention. My number 3 was Devontae Parker, where he finally had that breakout game. 5 catches, 156 yards, all of them being 20 plus yard catches or more. Kind of showed he kind of his old self when he was with the Dolphins, where he had the 1,000-yard season. So I know he didn't have a good first 2 games and he was playing a lot. He kind of had that breakout performance this week. With Mac on the shelf now, we'll see how how he plays going forward, but it was at least an encouraging sign for someone that they traded for to be their number one wide receiver, and he showed up.
Yep. I had Parker as well. And again, I think one of the reasons too why he did really well in this game too was just the matchup that he was getting,
Yep.
where they kept putting Humphrey on the field to try and get that mismatch with the Ravens defense. And the Ravens ended up putting why am I blanking on his name? But one of their better cornerbacks on him rather than Parker, and then Parker got Stevens, and he was blasting Stevens, and then eventually they ended up swapping the coverage because they realized that Humphrey is not really a good wide receiver. I don't know why they had him on him, the other guy on him so much, but he had a good game for the most part, other than those kind of 2 interceptions that he's involved with. And again, part of it's his fault, part of it's Mac's fault, part of it's the coordinator's fault, but hopefully they get some of that cleaned up.
Yep. No, exactly.
All right, 3 down. We're gonna go really quick through this because I don't think we have really too many disagreements here.
Yeah. So number 1 is Aguilar, where he had that good week last week, Patriots breakout game, and then this week he has that costly fumble on a drive where the Patriots they were moving the ball, he was getting yards, and then just fumble it second time in 3 weeks where he fumbled it on a big drive in the fourth quarter, which is just inexcusable.
Yep, I had him too. You can't make that fumble there, even though I also don't think the Ravens had possession while they were in bounds actually with the ball. But
it was on the TV live. It didn't look like it on the TV. On the TV replays, it looked like he barely did. But
anyway, you can't make that fumble. That was too big of a play. If he didn't make that fumble, likely they probably would have gone in and scored or had the opportunity to at least. And he stripped them of that chance.
Yep.
Next one.
Next one's Isaiah Wynn, just a bad game. He got beat on the outside, and then just costly penalties to stall drives again, which was his issue week 1 too. So just not a good performance so far for Wynn.
Yep, I had Wynn as well. He was terrible in this game. He allowed too much pressure. There was either from he couldn't handle the man he couldn't handle any of those stunts and the twists. And he's just not playing well this year. And he's playing, if he keeps this up, he's playing his way either onto the bench or away on a trade, like we had said before, where if Cannon keeps having those practice players of the week, I wouldn't be shocked if they ended up going with him or even Kajust on the right side and getting rid of him, because you can't be paying someone $10 million to suck this bad.
The thing with trading him, though, is if he continues to suck this bad, who the hell is going to take on that
contract? Last one.
I went with Mac, which I was kind of divided because for 90% of his throws, it was the best we've seen him, and I would have had him in the top 3, but it was those 4 or 5 bad decisions, which were just brutal and kind of cost them the game. So he's still young, and when he comes back from injury, hopefully he's able to pick up where he left off, but kind of shake those turnovers and bad plays to the side. But that's something that everyone's going to have bad weeks, bad throws, bad decisions, but it's 3 straight weeks where he's had some kind of mind-boggling what are you doing throws where he didn't really have many of those last year.
Yep. I had Mac too. I think you took all the words out of my mouth, and we kind of talked about it on Zoom. So we could just leave it at that. New segment we're adding this week, weekly trivia. Where I think Eric is probably going to be the one asking his trivia because he's more of the kind of trivia kind of guru, and I'll be the one that usually doesn't know anything that's going on. So we'll see if I can get the answer, and if not, at the end of the episode, he'll kind of give the answer.
Yep. So weekly trivia this week. Staying on the topic of quarterback, with Brian Hoyer being the Patriots quarterback, most likely going forward. When was the last time he won a game as a starting quarterback, and what team did he play for?
2016, the Browns.
First part, yes. Second part, no. It was not the Browns.
Texans?
No.
Oh God, who else was he with?
It was 2016 though.
I know it was 2016 because I saw it somewhere on Twitter.
Yeah, I was worried you were gonna see it with all the Brian Hoyer stuff, but
I don't know. We'll get back to actually. You can give it now because since I got half the answer.
Okay. Chicago Bears.
Oh yeah, I did see that. I forgot he played for them.
Yep. He actually, when he was with the Bears, went on a streak of 4 straight games, including the second game, which was the win, of throwing 300 yards or more.
Oh shit.
Yeah. The bad thing though is Brian Hoyer is 0 for 11 in his last 11 starts.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. But
yeah.
one other just factoid that I saw that was actually kind of surprising. Brian Hoyer has the highest QB winning percentage for the expansion Browns history of at least 10 starts or more at 625% winning percentage. He was 10-6.
Huh.
And in the history of the Cleveland Browns, if you include the old Cleveland Browns, he has the 8th highest winning percentage in the 73 years of the Cleveland Browns.
Baker Mayfield didn't have a higher winning percentage? No. Oh wow. All right. We'll see what Watson does if he doesn't go building anyone else. Mailbag question of the week. We're gonna kind of keep this up. Thanks again to @PatsFanKev. And again, that's not me. It's probably some other Kevin. But thank you for submitting the question that we chose for this. And yours was actually at first you would think when you see it, you're like, oh no, not that. And then you kind of look into it more. You're like, oh, that's actually a really, really good question. Has Stevenson taken over the running back one role? And just from when you look at carries and you look at who's really starting the game, Harris has started every single game. They split almost the amount of carries week to week. Harris sometimes does a little bit more, but other than that, they're very, very close. But when you actually look at how many plays they're on the field, I think you can kind of take this away since you're the one that found that little tidbit. I don't want to take all the credit from you, Eric.
Yeah. No, you can take the credit. But the interesting thing is, like, especially to start the game, usually it's Harris takes the first drive and then Stevenson takes the next drive unless someone needs a breather. But as the game goes on, they pretty much get about the same number of carries. But Stevenson has been on the field almost double Harris the last couple of weeks. Last week, Harris was on the field for 27 plays. Stevenson was on the field for 42. This week, Harris was on the field for 25 plays. Stevenson was on the field for 41. So again, about more than 1.5 times the amount of snaps. I don't know if it's just specific matchups or if they feel Stevenson might be a little better at pass protection, but I think going forward, they might split depending. One week, it might be a little bit more of a better matchup for Harris. One week, it might be a little bit more for Stevenson. But I think that the way Stevenson's been playing, he might be taking over that role from Damian Harris.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of argue with that, and they're both really good backs, and like all of them, but Stevenson's really quick, and we talked about that beforehand.
Yeah.
So great question, Pat's fan Kev, and we'd have to go with he's starting to take that role.
Yeah.
4 questions, kind of our last segment. First one: what backup QB would you trust in the NFL right now to play a 4-game stretch more than Brian Hoyer at this point?
So it's a good question. And I think as a backup overall, I think Hoyer's one of the best backups because of him essentially being a second coach on the field for Mac last year and this year, where he's a second set of eyes. He can, after we saw this year, especially where he doesn't have, Mac doesn't have Josh McDaniels to go to, but when he comes off the field, he goes to Joe Judge and he goes to Brian Hoyer. So he has that knowledge that can help. But when we talk about specifically game playing as a backup quarterback, where if your quarterback goes down, you want someone that can win you some games, it's kind of tough. There's 4 quarterbacks that I have that I would rather have starting. Jimmy Garoppolo, which you can argue if he started the year as a backup quarterback. So assuming I'd rather have Jimmy, assuming I know that he'll play for 4 games. That's the one issue with him. You don't know if he'll be able to if in a backup situation. Jacoby Brissett, I've always liked. He's never going to do anything to go out and win you the game, but he's a really good game manager. And
Ryan Fitzpatrick, part 2. He's going to be played with every single team. He's going to always be in the league. He's going to be steady. He's not going to win a ton of games. He's not going to lose a ton
Ryan
of games.
Fitzpatrick could win you some games, but and also lose you some games depending on the hot streak he had.
Yeah, that's what I do with Jacoby. He'll play really well. He won't play really bad. He won't play like Tom Brady, but
Yeah.
he'll be serviceable.
Yeah, exactly. And then Gardner Minshew, I know both of us are big fans of. I know you're a bigger fan of than I am, but he's a good quality quarterback who's more of a game manager. And then Taylor Heineke. Those are the four that for certain I'd probably rather have on the field than Brian Hoyer. After that, you kind of get into more of a grayish zone where they're all very similar and you don't really know what to go with. Like Joe Flacco, Andy Dalton, Nick Foles, which is not the Nick Foles of 2017. It's the Nick Foles who was the third string on the Bears last year.
Mm-hmm.
Case Keenum, Tyrod Taylor, Colt McCoy, Chad Henne.
Mm-hmm.
Between those and Hoyer, it's all kind of a toss up. Hoyer's been in the system for 7 years, so edge might go him. Then there's also Sam Darnold, who he has upside. I know both of us liked when coming out of USC and then also when he was with the Jets. But again, you don't know. He could be the quarterback seeing ghosts in a game during those 4-week stretches where Hoyer won't be like that unless it's a Sunday night or Monday night game.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead. So who you say? What one of those four would you say?
I'd say I trust all four of those over Brian.
Which one would you take if you had to take one?
If I know they're healthy, Jimmy, or I'd probably go Jimmy regardless. But after that, I'd say probably Jacoby, safest bet.
All right, so I would say Jimmy, and because I'm going to say if we're not counting Jimmy because he's starting right now,
Yeah,
I would go with Gardner Minshew because I'm a big Gardner Minshew fan. I
yeah.
think he should be starting somewhere in the NFL. I think he's got enough talent to be doing that. So one of those two, assuming Jimmy's not available, I'd go with Gardner.
Yeah.
Next question. If Mac misses 6 games this year, because usually the typical average 6 to 8 weeks, could see 4 to 6 weeks, could be a little bit less, could be a bit more. So
Yep.
could be really anywhere from 2 to 8 weeks. So let's say he misses 6 right there in the middle. Will the Patriots make the playoffs?
I think it's going to come right down to the end. I say it's 50-50. This is also before the season started. I said they were going 12-5.
Mm-hmm.
I stick with my predictions until I'm proven wrong. But they have a tough game this week with Green Bay, and then they're going up against Detroit Lions, Cleveland Browns without Deshaun Watson, Chicago Bears, New York Jets, Indianapolis Colts, and then New York Jets again. So a pretty easy stretch of the schedule where as long as Hoyer doesn't turn the ball over and he's able to move the offense a little bit, along with a strong running game and strong defense, they'll at least be in those games. And if you win the turnover margin, you'll have a good shot. So I think there's a good chance, or there's a chance they can make the playoffs. I think part of it's going to depend on a few years ago, teams went 11-5 and missed the playoffs. Last year, teams went 10. I think Steelers were 9-8 and they made the playoffs, or 8-1. So it's going to depend on how the rest of the AFC goes as well. So that's why I'm going to put 50-50.
Yep. I'm going to say yes because I still think that if he misses 6, all of those games are all winnable, except for really the Packers. Even the Packers is kind of a crapshoot where something can happen where, let's say the offense stalls like it has in 2 of the 3 games
for the Packers.
For the Packers, not the Patriots, because the Patriots been the same sort of thing. But let's say it gets into a low-scoring game and it's really who has the ball last. Patriots could somehow pull it off, and I wouldn't be shocked. I just wouldn't bet on it. But other than that, I think all the other games would be very winnable with Hoyer, because Hoyer's not a bad quarterback. He's not great, but he can do the job as long as he doesn't have as many turnovers. And I still think they get 10, 11 wins. And assuming that they can get in the playoffs with 10 or 11 wins, then they're making the playoffs. If they need to get 12, there's no way. But 10 or 11 wins, they'll make the playoffs.
That's fair.
Next question. If Hoyer had to start the entire season, how many games will they win? For this season in particular.
I went with them going 12-5 with Max. So without going like game by game, I'm just going to go 8-9. Maybe they pull off a winning record 9-8. I know they went 7-9 with Cam Newton, and they had a worse talent wise on the roster, but also the AFC wasn't as strong then as it is this year. So I'm going to go 8-9 with possibly 9-8.
Yeah. So I had said 11-6 to begin the season with Mac. I would say at most, I would say probably 9 wins with Hoyer. So I think Mac would give you an additional 2. So I would say 9 and was it 9
9 and
7
8.
9 and 8. So 9 and 8.
Yeah.
Last question, and this is opposite really of the Patriots. If you're the Ravens, because we just saw them, and do you go ahead and try and sign Lamar long term, or are you going to go year to year with the tag?
So I know both of us aren't Lamar fans.
Mm-hmm.
He is special where he's a running. His legs are what makes him special, where he can
Mm-hmm.
run, and then he's getting better at being throwing from the pocket. The one thing with NFL is it's a quarterback league where if you don't have a quarterback, you're not going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only probably say 12, maybe 14 quarterbacks, if you're lucky, that are good enough to possibly bring a good team to win a Super Bowl. Unless you have another quarterback that can really replace them, that you draft well, or you think is going to be available via trade, which I know there's more in recent years that are being traded than there were in the past, but I really don't know. I'd say if you sign him to a 5-year contract, I'd say that's the most I would give him. If you tag him the next 2 years and then there's still, you don't get anyone either via draft or free agency or trade, you're kind of stuck at square one again, unless you think their backup, I'm blanking on his name, who's played well in the preseason when he's played, but
Mm-hmm.
unless you think he can take over, you're kind of going back to square one and just trying to fish out that next
Mm-hmm.
quarterback. So I'd say maybe sign him to a 5-year contract and then try and draft someone or trade or free agent and develop them. But other than
Mm-hmm.
that, it's a quarterback league. If you don't have a quarterback, you're not going to win. So I'd say, well, before the season started, I'd say no, go year to year
Mm-hmm.
with him. But now, seeing he has improved this year, I'd say you'd have to try and sign him long term. Nothing more than 5 years, but
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Where I would have said even before, just franchise him twice. But when I did a little bit more looking, he was only 21 when he started with the Ravens.
yeah,
So a 5-year contract would bring him to 31. If they franchise him twice, that would give them so he's 26, 27. So what are their plans for quarterback afterwards? So that's the big thing. If you can't find someone, you're screwed. So
yeah.
do they have a plan where they could find someone and get someone on board so they don't really miss any time? Or is it better off to try and win around him as long as you can? I would really say 4 at most 5 years, because especially we see with any of these mobile quarterbacks, their length of time that they're good for is a lot less than pocket passers.
Yeah.
So Cam Newton's out of the league at what, 32 when he
Yeah.
was. Russell Wilson looks toast at 33, and even last
And
year
he's
he
not even
looked
really
good.
a running quarterback.
Yeah, and he's been on the decline the last few years too.
Mhm.
So it wasn't even last year where it started happening beforehand. So any of these mobile quarterbacks that they don't last as long, and that's really all he's got. Not all he's got, but that's what he makes his name and bread over. Where like Josh Allen, like we talked about, he also can sling it, and he's gotten a lot more accurate than he was before.
Yeah.
So I would say 4, maybe 5 years, but again, it's gonna be stupid money he wants. So
Yeah. You're
that's
just
the
in a
one
position where
thing.
you have to.
Yeah, where you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you think that you can find the next guy, and honestly, there's the backup that played for him last year. He did the same sort of stuff that Lamar could do.
Yeah.
And if you can find the same type of player, then maybe just keep doing that. But if you can't, then you
Tyler
got,
Huntley.
yeah. But yeah, I think we're kind of in agreement there. All right, so I think that kind of wraps up our 4 questions of the week, and we'll gonna go next to preview the Packers game with Andrew Discato. So
Dakota.
Dakota. So we'll look forward to listening right now.
Our Packers preview, we invite special guest Andrew Dakota to join us, who is a friend of the show and a lifelong Packers fan, unfortunately. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you asking me to be a part of this podcast this week.
Of course. With the Patriots playing the Packers, seeing that they were playing them during the offseason, I thought you'd be a really good guest for this episode, since you're a lifelong Packers fan. You watch every game, and you'd give us some good insights as to the team, since we don't get to watch them every week. So I know
Try
it's
my
only 3
best.
games into the what?
I'll try my best.
Okay. I'm sure you'll do a good job. So I know we're only 3 games into the season so far, but overall, what's your just high level thoughts of the Packers so far into the season?
Yeah, well, I think for the Packers, they have a lot of pieces, a lot of young guys on both sides of the ball, guys that we got from the draft, and Christian Watson's probably the biggest name that people know, especially non-Packers players. Receiver, super athletic, and then adding Quay Walker too on the defensive side of the ball from the national championship Georgia Bulldogs as well. So that's one thing that's sticking out to me through these 3 games is kind of, watching the younger guys get more of a role than they typically have, at least in recent years anyway. So because they're still young all around, you still got Rashawn Gary, who's just a couple years in, AJ Dillon. So there's a lot of youth, but a lot of athleticism too. So I'm excited to see how that kind of plays out this year.
Yeah, that's good to know. And it kind of just segues kind of well into the next question, which both of me and Kevin have, is just the Packers offense. Through the first 3 weeks, they've been kind of sputtering. They scored only 7 points the first week. They scored 27 the second week against Chicago, but again, only 14 points last week on the first 2 drives, and then weren't able to score after that. What do you think is leading to the slow start? Do you think missing Devontae Adams is a big portion of it, or is it just early in the season, just trying to, like, in New England, a lot of times we say the first 4 weeks is an extension of the preseason. Do you think it's kind of just that kind of the Packers trying to get into the swing of things? What do you think
Yeah,
is the cause of this?
I think it's both of those things really. Obviously, it's a huge adjustment, trying to figure out an offense without Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
Anytime you have to replace 169 targets, I think it was, for a target share of like roughly 32% in 2021, which was only second to, I think, Cooper Kupp. It's going to be a struggle coming up with the game plan, especially early on. And as I mentioned too, we're relying on youth much more than we have in the past years. Young guys like Romeo Dobbs, Christian Watson are getting significant reps as skill position players. And overall, I think they've played pretty well, but both are prone to rookie mistakes. Obviously one that sticks out the most. Not sure if you got to see the Packers in week 1, but Watson dropped a would-be touchdown pass on the Packers' very first offensive snap. And as most people know, Rodgers tends to get frustrated pretty easily with the rookies and their mistakes. But I think that'll kind of start to settle in as the season progresses. But and I think that was rookie mistakes is definitely evident, especially in that Minnesota game. You mentioned only putting up 7 points, but in week 2 we scored 27 points against our biggest rival in the Bears. And then this past week, we scored 14 against an elite defense in the Bucs. I think they held the Cowboys to 3 points in week 1, and I think they played the Saints in week 2, and they might have scored maybe 10 points. Yeah. The Packers had really had 3 solid drives in the first half, ate up a lot of clock, scored 2 touchdowns on those drives. And then the third was a fumble by Aaron Jones, at the goal line, recovered by the Bucs. But, that was on 3rd down. I would have guessed the Packers would probably go for it. But if not, it's, at very least a field goal right there. So that's 3 points. There's another play in the second half. They were driving a little bit, not as well as the first half, but there was a play where one of their younger receivers, Jawan Winfrey, got tripped up on like this XY kind of crosser route. Would have been pretty open right around the 20-yard line of the Bucs. Again, that could have been maybe another 3 points. So, we had our opportunities. It's just, need to execute a little bit better. But the Bucs are a really good team. So yeah.
No, that's fair. And I think that's something that as Patriots fans, we've seen a lot of this year, where Patriots were able to move the ball, but especially near the end of drives, they just weren't able to execute and then finish the drives. So I think that's just part of it. Is you guys still have Aaron Rodgers, who's one of the best quarterbacks in football, and I think it'll just take a little bit of time, but they'll start picking things up. Hopefully not this week, hopefully the week after. But
what are you talking about? But I agree with that, though. I think you guys are pretty young on that side of the ball too, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you guys definitely understand what it's like. And I mean, you guys have a young quarterback too, so that always throws in its challenge. You did. You're right. But let me
so that actually segue into our next point. Quarterback matchup this week. A little uneven, Aaron Rodgers versus most likely Brian Hoyer. Kevin, what we'll start with you, Kevin. What are your thoughts into, is this going to be an even, how uneven of a matchup is this going to be?
Oh, I think it is completely uneven. The one thing that's in the Patriots' favor is just like we said, the slow start to the Packers, and the Patriots haven't had that great of a start either, but they have made some progress week after week, and the Packers is kind of uneven. So maybe you're hoping to get that downward trend with the Packers, and they don't look like a great cohesive team yet, and you're kind of hoping where the Patriots defense can do something to stop Rodgers, and they can maybe do enough where they can hold on and win the game. Where if Brian Hoyer does what you signed him to do and be that game manager, they have a chance. Is it likely? No. But it's not anything where you could say they would get destroyed. Their defense is playing still pretty well. They did give up 37 points ago, the Ravens, but again, they had 4 turnovers. So you can't go saying all those points are really credited to the Ravens offense, where they get better field position, they get more opportunities as well. So whenever you have a huge turnover differential like that, it's always going to be a high scoring game, or it should be. So as long as Brian Hoyer takes care of the ball, he doesn't make any stupid mistakes. And the last thing everyone remembers of him is that Chiefs game in 2020, where he completely lost his mind, crapped his pants twice in the game. There was the time he lost track of downs, and there's another thing I can't remember, but both times the coaches, you could see on the film.
There's one at the end of the half. I can't remember if that's when he lost.
Yeah, the end of the half is when he lost track of downs. And he took a sack. Oh, lost track. They didn't have any timeouts.
Lost track of time.
So he took, So he took a sack, and then there's another time where I think I can't remember, but there's a really bad play, and that's after that. That's when they ended up benching him that game. As long as he doesn't do that, they'll be fine. Usually, a lot of the times that you'll see with him is that for most games, he could be that game manager, that kind of average quarterback. But it's when the lights really get shine bright is when he kind of really craps his pants. So that's what happened in the playoff game when he started. That's what happened in the Chiefs game. So it's a 4:00 game against the Packers, pretty big game, national game.
Yeah.
So Tony Romo's got the call with CBS. So it's the top game for CBS. So how is he going to fare with that? Is he going to kind of rise to the challenge? It's going to kind of pitter patter. That's the big thing. I don't have complete trust in it. And then if I had to pick one or the other, gun to my head, it'd definitely be Rodgers, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So Andrew, do you have any other thoughts on quarterback? I know it's pretty straightforward.
I think
Hoyer,
Kevin kind of, hit the nail on the head there. I'm interested to see the matchup though. Hoyer, the Destroyer, is a vet that's been in the lead for, I don't know how many years, a long time.
Yeah.
He's had 40 career starts or something like that under his belt. And I think he's been on the Patriots for about half of those years.
Yeah. Something along those lines.
Yeah. 6 or 7 years or something like that, I think it was. So he definitely has experience. And I think, like Kevin said, if he can be a game manager, take care of the ball, I think is the most important thing for him to do. I think you guys will be okay. Probably rely a little bit more on your run game this week, and then your defense too. I'm always scared, even though we got Rodgers, I'm always scared to go up against a Belichick defense. So I think that's, the Rodgers Belichick matchup's actually a pretty big thing this week. So
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so I think really the next kind of big question would be about the Packers defense, where again, not really a side that we've seen too much of. We only really see the Packers once every 4 years for the Patriots, and then whatever we catch on TV. They're ranked in the top 10 in the NFL in 2021 in almost every category. Has that carried over the season? Have we seen the same sort of kind of play on that aspect, or have they regressed? Have they gotten better? What are your thoughts on the defense?
I think it has carried over. The loss to Minnesota in week 1 might look otherwise. I think we gave up 180 plus yards and 2 touchdowns to Justin Jefferson. That area of the defense kind of struggled a little bit, but you got to think back to week 1 of last year. We gave up, I think, 38 points to the Saints. And then we started to settle in as the season progressed, and especially in an offense-oriented league, that's bound to happen a few times throughout the season. I'd rather it happen earlier than kind of start to settle in. So I try not to look too deep into that. But I think this year we actually have the potential to be even better on the defensive side of the ball, as long as everybody stays healthy, of course, as it is with every team. But, we're super athletic on all levels with Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark up front. You got returning all-pro linebacker Devondre Campbell. And then we added Quay Walker, as I mentioned, from Georgia in the draft at linebacker position as well. And then you got Jair Alexander and Eric Stokes at the cornerback position. So we're both super freaky athletes as well. So I think this is the most athletic defense I've seen in quite some time. Maybe going back to when we had Clay Matthews, Charles Woodson, and them. I'm not comparing them to that defense, but I'm excited. And again, we just need everybody to stay healthy, but I think we have the potential to be even better in 22. So I'm excited.
Yeah, that's good to know. What would you say the overall strength of the defense is? Is it more run or is it pass? Because I know looking at stats alone, they were pretty much even all across the board in both aspects, at least statistic wise last year.
Yeah. Based off what I've seen this year and based off last year, I would say it's probably about even. I think games we lose, other than Minnesota, that's kind of a bad example this year, but we usually get gashed pretty hard by opposing teams running games. So I would say that we're probably a slight edge or slightly stronger with our passing game, but I would say it's probably pretty even. In years past, we used to have to rely on these exotic blitzes that are drawn up in order to get pressure, but as you know, that puts strain on the secondary because there's less guys back there. So we're doing a better job at getting pressure with just our guys up front, the Rashawn Garys, the Kenny Clarks in the middle. So I would say probably about even though to answer your question about the pass and run. So
that's helpful. And as a Patriots perspective, granted they're both very good, but if you'd want one to be worse, especially this week with Mac Jones being out, you'd prefer that their run defense be a little worse, especially with two-headed monster of Stevenson and Harris. So I think that's something we'll have to keep an eye on this week.
Yeah, that definitely does make me nervous. I feel like the Patriots always have a pretty solid run game. And with those two beasts that you guys got back there, it does make me nervous. So I think we're going to really have to be stout up front, maybe with Mac being out a little bit. We'll probably put in some of our bigger guys in like Jaron Reed a little bit more with Kenny Clark. Try to beef up the interior a little bit, but we'll see. I'm super excited to see kind of what unfolds with that.
I think that's, if the Patriots are going to have a shot, they're going to have to run the ball. But
I would agree with that.
I think one question I do have is, especially for Patriots fans that don't have a chance to watch the Packers as much, what are like two position matchups that favor the Packers and two that might not favor the Packers? Essentially, like wide receivers versus cornerback, not wide receiver versus wide receiver. So like the Packers wide receivers versus Patriots cornerbacks or something along those lines.
That's a good question. And I actually would say I have the same answer for both teams.
Yeah.
In the sense of, I think both teams' advantages are cornerback position against receiver. Like, so cornerback being an advantage, receiver being disadvantage on both sides of the ball. I know you guys have, I think Jonathan Jones, right? I think he's PFS, like number 1 graded cornerback at this point. For whatever that's really worth, but I know you guys.
I know how big of a fan you are of Collinsworth, but
don't even get me going there. But the Patriots also have 3 very good quarterbacks. For them too, and Jair Alexander, Eric Stokes, and Rasul Douglas. Alexander left the game early though against the Bucs this past week with what I think appeared to be a groin injury. So I'm hoping that won't be like a nagging thing that keeps him out of some games this year. But I think those are definitely 2 of the strong points for both teams. And then the receivers, I don't know what your opinion is on the Patriots receivers, but I know at least for the Packers, that's obviously a huge question mark for us moving forward. I've mentioned a couple of times the rookies we got there. Now Sammy Watkins is on IR. Per usual. And Lazard's good, but I don't know. I have to see him more in the wide receiver 1 role to really get a better understanding of what his true capabilities are. I really liked him as a number 2 last year when we had Adams, obviously as our 1, but I don't know too much about your receiving core. I know Adelor, I think he looked pretty good last week. But Tyquan Thornton's out for an extended period of time for you guys. I know he's a Blazer.
I think for our wide receivers, which I think Kevin will agree with this, is that they don't have that number 1 option, but they have good depth. So they have 4 even with Tyquan Thornton out, assuming Jacoby Myers is healthy, which he missed yesterday's game, but if he's able to be back and return to his old self, they have 4 wide receivers that are good number 2, number 3 options. They don't have that number 1, but the number 4 option will definitely be better than a team's 4th cornerback. And then depending on the matchup, 1 week it might be 1 receiver, 1 week it might be another one. So it's good depth, but they don't have that 1 guy that'll beat you.
Yeah. And I would say for the Packers too, we don't really have a true number 1 either. So it seems a little bit similar. I think you guys do have more depth than we do. But again, it's hard to say going off of 3 games where you have rookies. It's, a small sample size. So
exactly.
And that's kind of a good transition to the next question where, as you know, from watching Bill all over these years, he usually takes away the top 2 options that a team has and make them kind of go with the 3rd, 4th option and try and beat them that way. And if the 3rd and 4th option can beat them, then all power to them. If they can't, a lot of times they can't, then that's how they kind of win the game. So I would assume Lazard and the running backs would be the top 2 options that we really would have to take care of. And is that correct? And if so, who would be the kind of the 3rd and 4th options that you would have to expect to step up and have a big game?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you're right. I would say at this point of the year anyway, Lazard and then the 2 bats and Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon are our biggest threats really on offense. To answer your question, I think it's hard to say really who, I don't really think we have solidified number 3 and 4s, but guys that I think would have to step up, this week, assuming that Belichick takes away our top options would be, again, the rookies, Dobbs and Christian Watson. I think they're going to continue to get more looks and, hopefully they can produce. Another guy I think too is Randall Cobb. The Rodgers and Cobb connections obviously been going on for a long time now. And
seems like decades.
Yeah, there was a little hiatus when he went to the Cowboys and Houston for a little bit. But back on the team, he had I think 2 explosive plays this past weekend against the Bucs that set the Packers up on both of their touchdown scoring drives. So I would expect to see him targeted as well if Lazard and the bats are kind of taken out of the game. I think we'll see a lot of 2-bat sets though with both Aaron Jones.
That was one question I was going to ask is, since they do have 2 really good running backs, we haven't watched too much. Do they do a lot of 2 running back sets? Because you would think that would be an advantage if they were able to do that.
Yeah. So, week 1 again was kind of a little weird.
Yeah.
It was a weird week for us, but the past couple of games we've been seeing more of the 2-bat sets. I think the Packers are at the point where the receiver group is, I don't want to say weak, but just not really established.
Yeah.
So you just want to try to get your 11 best guys on the field. And that just happens to be, Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon in that group. So they really want to, get both those guys involved. They can both run the ball well. They're actually both pretty good in the pass game. Aaron Jones, I think, is really good in the pass game.
Yeah.
AJ Dillon is serviceable as well. A couple of times we've seen Dillon almost act as like a fullback too, as a lead blocker for Jones. So there's different things that I think the Packers will do to throw a little wrinkle in for the defense. But I really think that one of the big things for us is going to be establishing that run game early on. That's what we did against the Bears when we won in week 2. That's what we did on those 2 early scoring drives against the Bucs. We started slowing down and we had little to no gains on the ground for first and second downs. You got into kind of 3rd and long situations where you're a little bit more predictable, a little more one-dimensional. So I think really establishing those 2 guys, Jones and Dillon, would be key for us. But I'm hoping you don't take them away. But if you do, I think those rookies and Randall Cobb will have to have a big game. So
that's fair. And then one of the last questions that at least I have is, since we are a Patriots centered podcast, if the Patriots were to go into Green Bay and win, and this again is most likely with Brian Hoyer at the quarterback, what would have to happen for that to occur? Either for the Patriots, what would they have to do, and or what would the Patriots have to do to win, and or what would the Packers have to do to lose?
Yeah, well, I think this is going to sound really cliche, but I think it's really just going to come down to who takes care of the ball, wins that turnover battle, and who can limit penalties. I think I read somewhere earlier this week, or it might have been last night or today actually, that during Matt LaFleur's time with the Packers, they're 36-1 when they force at least 1 turnover in a game. So it's pretty substantial. But Belichick's Pats are usually always very disciplined. He drills taking care of the ball into them, limiting penalties. So I think if you guys can do that, you have a very, very solid chance at beating us. But I would say maybe an X factor in the game could be special teams. I don't know much about you guys, but last year was awful for us.
I think every year is with the Packers special teams.
Don't even get me started on onside kicks, but
our special teams it's inconsistent. Last year was 2 years ago or usually it's the best in football. Last year it was pretty bad. This year, some good. Week 2 is good. Week 1 and this past week wasn't good. So
early on, so I feel you. I know Packers Nation is, they're really excited about the Rich Bisaccia era, our new special teams coach. So we'll see. They played really well yesterday. I think they were, obviously our defense, but they were a huge reason why we were able to pull off a win against Tom Brady yesterday. So, I would say, taking care of the ball and limiting penalties, though, would be my 2 keys for the Pats that, that's what they would need to do to pull out a W, especially on the road in Green Bay. So
that's fair.
I think that leads us into kind of our last question. That's the game predictions. So I think we can kind of go down the list, and I don't have the favorite yet who it is, but I can look that up while we're
Packers by 9.5.
Oof.
Wow.
It's probably, I think, a fair line for them.
Yeah.
So I'll go first. I'm gonna say Packers 17-13. I think it's gonna be kind of a close scoring game, just because looking at the way the Packers have been offensively the last 3 weeks, I'm gonna kind of split the difference between week 2 and week 1 and 3. So figure 17 points. The Patriots defense has been mostly good for the whole time. So especially they don't have too many weapons that they have to take care of, so they can kind of hone in on there and say so. I'm going to say they kind of limit him, but again, I don't think Brian Hoyer does enough in this game. There'll be some sort of moment where he may have some sort of brain fart or something, because it's 4:00 game, national TV. Something might happen. So 17-13, I say.
Yeah, that's respectable.
I'll go next. I'm going Packers 20-13. I think that the Packers lead pretty much the entire game. They have to lead the whole game, and it's close, but it doesn't really feel like the Patriots are in it, and they just can't do enough to win. So I think I know a lot of people are expecting a really big blowout, but I think it's going to be similar to 2 years ago when it was Brian Hoyer versus the Chiefs, where Patriots defense really locked in on the Chiefs and they made it a close game, even though the offense couldn't move the ball. I think the offense will be a little better this week because Hoyer has a week to prepare. The offensive players are better, but I just don't think they'll have enough to pull it out.
Yeah.
And last but not least, Andrew.
All right. I actually also think it's going to be a close game. I would say I would choose the Packers winning 24-20. So a little bit higher scoring than what you guys had predicted. I think it could be similar kind of to what happens this past weekend on the Packers side anyway, where, we might score early, but then, we stall. Belichick makes his adjustments. I'm very, very scared of his defenses usually. So I could see us, kind of getting on the board early, but then stalling for a while. Just not being able to put the Pats away. You guys creep into the game. But I think we hold on, hopefully. So I'm going to say 24-20.
All right. Well, this should be a really interesting game. And again, thank you, Andrew, for joining us. It was really good to have that insight, especially for a team we don't see too often. And we see once every 4 years against the Patriots, and then really whatever's on TV, which is kind of more often now than other times. But really good to have you on board. And we'll probably maybe get some recap from you afterwards. Make sure you follow on Twitter if you want, and if you want to give yourself a plug if you want. If not,
Andrew's one of our biggest followers.
Yeah, I try to listen to you guys every week. I really enjoy your stuff. You guys do really good work. So,
all right. So again, follow us on at Pat's 300 Level Pod on Instagram, Twitter, our website Pat's 300 Level. Pats300levelpod.com. Subscribe, rate, review on all of your podcast platforms and YouTube. So thank you very much, and look forward to talking to you next time.